why Max Holloway's story will leave you inspired. Over the last decade or so, Max Holloway has established himself as one of the greatest featherweights of all time. But those who know how the star became one of the all-time greats also know his story is truly one of the most inspiring the game has ever seen. In fact, the Holloway story has all the markings of an amazing, gripping, and unforgettable biography or motion picture. Despite enduring numerous challenges during his childhood and then later in his fighting career, Blessed has continued to battle and accomplish things few people on this earth can match. Not only that, and in spite of his awe-inspiring success, Holloway has remained one of the most humble, gracious, and respected figures in all of combat sports. So, if you don't know, why is Max Holloway's story one of the most intriguing and inspiring ones mixed martial arts has seen? Well, before we discuss that any further, if you enjoy this video, please make sure to like it and to subscribe to KO Central MMA. Now with that piece of business out of the way, let's dive into why the Blessed story will undoubtedly leave you inspired. The early days and challenges at home. Jerome Max Kelly Holloway was born on December 4th, 1991 in Honolulu, Hawaii, and was raised in Waianae. If you're familiar with Hawaii, then you may know that the poverty rate in Waianae is very high. According to some studies, the poverty rate in the region is over 60% higher than the average poverty rate for the entire United States. So, in other words, Holloway did not have access to the same socioeconomic opportunities and benefits so many others do, and grew up amongst the issues that often accompany extreme poverty. But Holloway's challenges and hurdles to a stable and prosperous life weren't restricted to the outside world. The Hawaiian star has been very open about the fact that he came from a broken home and a childhood that was heavily impacted by parental drug addiction. In a recent interview on the MMA Hour, Holloway reflected on his childhood and how his father was out of the picture at a very young age. "I really didn't have both of them. I didn't have a dad at all," Holloway said. "And it was funny, it took my wife to explain to me, yeah, you had father figures, but that's not the same. My grandpa was my father figure. She had a hard time explaining it. He's like me dad, but he's not. He's still your grandpa. And it finally hit me he was a father figure, but he wasn't my actual father. So if I can give my son a father and mother, it would be great." Further, the charismatic fighter talked in length about his relationship with his mother, who battled drug addiction throughout his childhood. "It was insane, but I saw some stuff you're not supposed to see. Like my mom fighting with her siblings and stuff in front of us when we were kids. To me, this is normal. This is normality because I see this, so I'm not questioning it. And then when you watch these movies and stuff, you're like, this is fake. There's no way a family can be like this. At the end of the day, there's just things I feel like I had to go through. I had to endure, so I can get my story out later on." Yup, and Holloway did more than endure. He used his situation as a motivational tool to keep learning and battling towards a better life. Martial arts and fighting, Holloway discovered, was the path he was going to take to do so. Case in point, Max took his first amateur kickboxing match when he was just a young teenager, and he did so after just 3 days of training. That's not the kind of thing you hear every day, and we now know it was a compelling sign of how remarkable Holloway's life was going to be. Holloway's first UFC chapter. After Holloway went 4-0 to begin his pro career, the future star joined the UFC at the young age of 20, and in doing so, he became the youngest fighter on the UFC roster. Even today, when it's not too uncommon for people to start training in MMA when they're still kids, it's very rare to see 20-year-olds walking through the octagon gate. Holloway agreed to fight none other than Dustin Poirier on short notice, and although he lost the bout via submission, he quickly punted any doubts about his abilities by winning 3 straight fights. The streak came to an end when Holloway dropped a split decision loss to the rugged Dennis Bermudez in 2013. After that came a showdown with Conor McGregor. Now, at the time, the hype train behind McGregor was already getting pretty massive, so much of the spotlight, if not all of it, was on the future champ. Although Holloway put up a strong showing, he lost the fight via decision, and it kinda seemed like a lot of folks either wrote him off as a future champ or just forgot about him, full stop. But in typical Holloway fashion, the rugged Hawaiian kept grinding, and the Blessed era was about to kick off. The blessed era begins. As 2014 began, few people, if any, could have predicted the epic and historic role Holloway was about to embark on. As noted at the time, Holloway was coming off back-to-back losses, and his UFC record was sitting at 3-3. Sure, Holloway was really still a kid who'd shown ridiculous amounts of toughness and skill, but in a sport that's about what have you done for me lately, his prospect status remained swept under the rug. Well, Holloway began writing that future best-selling biography or film by scoring wins over Will Chope, Andre Fili, Clay Collard, Akira Kurosani, and then Cole Miller. The run started to turn heads, but Holloway still wasn't a household name in the MMA world. That started to change, however, in 2015. That year, Holloway firmly established himself as a legitimate contender at 145 pounds by defeating the likes of Cub Swanson, Charles Oliveira, and then Jeremy Stephens, three of the most experienced and toughest featherweights on the planet. Holloway secures UFC gold for the first time. In 2016, Holloway had positioned himself as one of the best featherweights in the game, and now it was just a matter of proving it. That June, he was booked to throw hands with Ricardo Lamas. Not only did Holloway outscore Lamas to extend his winning streak to 9, the victory catapulted him into a bout with Anthony Pettis for the interim featherweight title. Despite the winning streak Holloway was on, and despite the names he had defeated during that run, there were still a lot of doubters who didn't see Holloway taking the belt. But, yet again, Holloway proved his detractors wrong as he proceeded to finish the former lightweight champ in round 3. Blessed starts to receive calls as the GOAT. So, before we get into this next chapter of Holloway's career, let's just take a quick recap of where we are in terms of inspiration. Holloway made his way to the UFC at the young age of 20. From a childhood that was impacted by poverty and parental drug abuse, and as 2017 began, Blessed was riding a 10-fight winning streak. Not inspired for some bizarre reason? Well, Holloway was about to take it up a notch and then some by defeating one of the sport's greatest fighters ever, not once, but twice. Yes, after winning the interim belt, Holloway was tapped to fight the legendary Jose Aldo. At the time, Aldo was just one fight removed from his historic and devastating loss to Conor McGregor, which had snapped the King of Rio de Janeiro's decade-long winning streak. So, while the quick KO loss to McGregor had left a blotch on Aldo's storied resume, at the time, he remains the consensus featherweight GOAT. Well, if you followed Holloway's career, then you know the fighter erased any questions about the blessed era being a thing by stopping Aldo in consecutive fights. The victories were so impressive that talk about Holloway being the featherweight GOAT started to make the rounds, especially after Holloway stopped Brian Ortega in December 2018. Holloway sprints down the comeback trail again. With the featherweight title firmly wrapped around his waist, Holloway reached for an even higher historic heights in 2019 by agreeing to face Dustin Poirier for the interim lightweight title. Holloway's awe-inspiring winning streak finally came to an end as Poirier's power and size proved to be the difference, and he won the fight via decision. Although Blessed lost the fight, his stock seemed to rise even further on account of the determination and toughness he demonstrated. The Hawaiian Marvel returned to the win column with a decision win over another legend, Frankie Edgar, later that year. But Holloway's championship reign was about to come to a halt on account of another GOAT contender, Alexander Volkanovski. The rising Australian powerhouse proceeded to decision Holloway in back-to-back very close fights. Despite the losses, Holloway, as per usual, never lost sight of his ambition, his desire to be the best, his wish to reclaim UFC gold. The vet ensured he remained in the title shot mix by outscoring Calvin Kattar and Yair Rodriguez in fights that left the MMA world gushing about Blessed's boxing abilities all over again. In the fight with Kattar, Max made headlines and then some by outstriking him by a 445-133 margin. While doing so, Holloway also proclaimed he's the best boxer in the MMA. Yeah, when you tag someone that many times with strikes, who's a pretty solid striker in their own right, that's not a bad time to do a wee bit of bragging. On account of those wins, Holloway was signed to face Volkanovski once again in 2022. This time around, the champ had even more answers for Holloway's puzzle, and the Blessed era, as far as the championship part of it, was firmly shuttered. Holloway remains an inspiration. Now, yes, as we approach the end of 2023, talk of Holloway reclaiming featherweight gold has diminished. But that doesn't mean the fighter doesn't remain one of the most respected and beloved athletes in the game. For example, here's what Arnold Allen had to say about Blessed before he was defeated by Max earlier this year. Future Hall of Famer for sure, ex-champion, one of the greatest featherweights of all time, Allen said. His resume is nothing short of inspiring. He's done all the things I want to do, and he's set the path for the things I want to do too. He's done everything I want to do. What better way to put me in that position than to beat the guy that's done all those things? Obviously, there's other fighters out there, but there's no more credible than Max. Yup, hard to argue any of that, and in fact, if you do, it might be time to take up following a different sport. Thankfully, it certainly seems like the vast majority of MMA fans understand what Holloway has accomplished and how special he is. As evidenced by his following on social media, Blessed has nearly 900,000 followers on Twitter and almost 3.5 million on Instagram. But how do you feel about Holloway's career and what he's accomplished to date? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to KO Central MMA.